Welcome back to Best of Trek, Worst of Trek, the show where we rank every live-action episode of the Star Trek franchise. Today's block consists of episodes that are quite good, but a little slow to build. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Setting Mars on fire at 290, loss of status, or maps and legends. The first few episodes of Picard definitely take their time building the show. We see a side of Picard we're not used to, one that has a very small sphere of influence. He's trying to figure out who blew up Daj, and we learn his Romulan indentured servants are ex-Tal Shiar, and have some pretty cool tech to see back in time. Picard goes to the Commander-in-Chief of Starfleet with what he learned about the Romulans operating on Earth, and gets laughed out of her office. This episode sets up the tone of the season where our main characters are at their lowest, with no one to turn to for help but each other, including Raffi, who we meet at the very end, living out on the iconic Vasquez Rocks, and is the most broken of this motley crew we're introduced to very slowly. I honestly don't mind how slow this build-up is, because the payoff of Commodore O that we're introduced to in this episode as the cause of all the main characters being broken is a tale well told. Falling from grace at 289, Naked and Afraid, or Deja Q. This one is simultaneously a classic and fun Trek episode, while also feeling like any sitcom from the late 80s, minus the laugh track. While the Enterprise is trying to help a planet whose moon has somehow changed orbit, Q shows up in his birthday suit, having been kicked out of the Continuum. The bulk of the rest of the episode is the extreme juxtaposition as Data teaches Q what it means to be human. Though, as it turns out, the crew of the Enterprise isn't the only group Q has tormented seemingly for his own amusement, and a fork-wielding Guinan is the least of his worries. The crew can't simultaneously keep Q safe from the Calamarain and put this moon back in orbit. In the end, Q is willing to sacrifice himself, and apparently that's what the Continuum was looking to see from him and reinstates his powers. He thanks the crew of the D with an extremely over-the-top display of gratitude. Yeah, the episode is a lot of fun to watch, though it does seem to have a lot of filler and feels a little out of place in the grand scheme of Trek. Abetting genocide at 288, loving the enemy, or remember. This is a really odd, almost bodice-ripper romance novel with a giant fascist twist. A group of people from a planet that uses a salad bowl on a piece of wood as an instrument are hitching a ride back to their planet on Voyager. Neelix turns the mess hall into a hookah lounge with pillows everywhere, as a bit of cultural exchange happens. Torres oversleeps because of a reoccurring naughty dream. This is all fun and games until she ends up unconscious in engineering, and by the end we find out she's been receiving this story from one of the older Onarans to try and share a memory of a time when her people basically sent another group, akin to the Amish, to death camps. Her lover in this story was part of the group that got sent away, and by the end, she actually seems to embrace the Nazi-like ideals. After the woman's death, B'Elanna tries to expose this truth that had been covered up for decades, and does manage to get one of the more open-minded Anarans to use their telepathy and view the memories herself. This episode feels particularly important today, as we don't seem to have learned the lessons of erasing history just because it's sometimes messy and inconvenient. Cleaning up after itself at number 287, Homicidal Hollow, or Revulsion. Back to back, these are two of my personal favorite episodes of Voyager, but both are a bit slow and dragged out and lose a few points in an objective review. That being said, Leland Orser is one of the most amazing villain actors of all time. And here we're dropped straight into a bloody scene of this hologram hiding the body of a crew member he's killed because he's very OCD and can't stand the thought of organic life. When he sends a distress call, this immediately piques the Doctor's interest as he and Torres go check out the ill-fated ship. The lighting is constantly dark for most of the episode and really sets this amazing foreboding tone. At first, the Hollow seems likable and just a little off. As the runtime wears on, though, that quiet demeanor cracks open into Garth of Izar level insanity, but in a way that doesn't feel so hokey. After a classic horror movie battle of slowly moving through the set pieces and a false climax, B'Elanna finally overloads his power matrix. There's a tiny B-plot where Seven not so subtly drops an offer of sex in Kim's lap, and Harry doesn't know what to do with this information. It almost becomes a case of sexual harassment as he reports his discomfort to Chakotay, and this is one of the few passes I'll give Star Trek, where a case of near sexual harassment can come off as funny. Being judged at 286. No changeling has ever harmed another, even though we were ready to let one die too. Or Broken Link. This is a classic DS9 episode that does a lot for Odo as a character, and sets a ton of things in motion in this Season 4 finale. Some great moments, though, are built on a pile of filler, and a premise that doesn't make sense to me. The Founders destabilized Odo's morphogenic matrix, forcing him to return home to be both cured and judged. His crime is being the only changeling in the history of the Great Link to harm another. Yet, this story is predicated on a situation where Odo kills to prevent another changeling from killing him, and the offer to leave the ship with him doesn't change the initial circumstance of the situation. The Founders judge him to be so humanoid that he's given that permanent, for now, form. This story takes up a surprisingly short amount of the runtime compared to the build-up getting there. Otherwise, we get side bets on Neresa's pregnancy sneezing, a scene with the reoccurring Boslik freighter captain, and a Bajoran chick that has the hots for Odo we'll never see again. I think the only two tropes that didn't make the episode were self-sealing stem bolts and a mention of Captain Baudet. The coolest side plot is Garrick telling Odo innuendos and half-truths about his life in the Obsidian Order. Employing deception at 285, ploy to start a war. Or The Defector will again set a slow tone to an episode by starting with Shakespeare. Data's on the holodeck advancing his understanding of humanity, and we get to see Patrick Stewart playing two roles in the same scene. A Romulan scout ship being chased by a warbird comes across the neutral zone, and the Enterprise gives its Romulan passenger asylum. I personally don't like the bulk of this episode for the same reason I don't like Duet. The obfuscation of identity, which is a huge chunk of both episodes, feel entirely unnecessary. However, the ending of this episode feels better, and Picard decides to act on the information Jarek gives him that the Romulans have built a cloaked base in the neutral zone, and goes to investigate. Thankfully, he planned for a typical Romulan ploy and calls in his favor from Gowron to bring 3 cloaked Klingon ships. The moment when Picard one-ups Tomalak and asks him if he's ready to die today is honestly one of the best moments across Trek. Unfortunately, Data doing Shakespeare in the intro and Picard being awesome at the end are the only things the episode has going for it. Wrapping up the block today at 284. Enhanced. Or Dr. Bashir, I presume. There's several great plot threads that set up character dynamics through the rest of the series here. Bob Picardo does a crossover as Louis Zimmerman, creator of the EMH, who wants to create a new LMH based on Bashir. Everything goes fine until he disregards Julian's request and contacts his parents as part of the background profile. This inadvertently brings up the fact they had Jules genetically altered to be stronger, smarter, and faster than ordinary humans. Which brings up the whole Khan eugenics thing and leaves the fate of Julian's Starfleet career in the hands of an admiral we've never seen before, using the holo communicator we'll barely see in the run of the show. His accomplishments and guilty plea of his father keep him in the service, and this breathes a new life into the character of Bashir. Season 1 into Season 2, his character was over the top, and was possibly the most unlikable main cast member in the history of Star Trek. Thankfully, the writing generally got better, and adding this seems to give the character a sense of completeness going forward. Though I know not all fans agree on this point. The subplot is also wonderful, as Zimmerman goes on a few dates with Lita and tries to entice her to come back to Jupiter Station and run a cafe. All the while, she's just waiting for Rom to ask her to stay, and he's crazy about her, but is no good at talking to women. Just as she's about to leave the station for good, Rom comes running to the airlock and kicks off this great cross-cultural multi-season romance. One of many great character-building episodes in the run of DS9.
Ah, computer.
That program is available.
Thanks, Major. Thanks, Major.
This system is calibrated to the Celsius metric system.
Thanks, Major.
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel. Priority message from Security Officer Klingon vessel Bortus.
Thanks, Major.
Program complete. Unable to derive necessary reference to establish translation matrix.
Thanks, Major.
Main shuttle bay is located on deck 4. Jorah Morell is in her quarters.
Thanks, Major.
Stand up, shut up, put up, now get in line. Get home, put the news on, pass out, ain't got no time. Do this all week, repeat, back to the grind.